So I'd like to welcome everyone to coming to today's presentation here for John F. Kennedy High School on the college aid process. I'm going to be going over a lot of stuff today. So if you guys have any questions, once again, in the Q&A box, just ask away in the Q&A box. I do have the Q&A box in the right-hand corner of the presentation here, so you guys can't see it, but I see your questions as they come in. So I'll be answering any questions you guys have throughout the slides. That being said, my name is Ed Zamora from Principia Prep. I've been in the world of college admissions and financial aid for a little bit over 24 years now. So any questions you guys have, whether they're state related like the Cal grants, or whether they're federal related, or anything to do with institutional aid for private colleges, just ask away. I can answer pretty much any questions you guys have. That being said, let's start today's presentation off. I'm going to be going over a lot of different topics here. This is going to cover a lot of the senior year as well as the junior year classes here we have here on the presentation. I will be giving you guys kind of a landscape of the college process, what's going on, both for the admissions and financial aid side, as well as the SAT, ACT optional situation, and kind of how it's affecting not only admissions, but also financial aid. As well as I'm going to go over the CARES Act, which is basically the federal government just gave the schools a bunch of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars, and how that's affected the schools for not just this year's senior class, but also for the junior class for next year, as well as scholarship searches, where to find scholarships, how to locate them, so on and so forth, as well as I'll be going over the Fafsa form, the CSS profile, and also some institutional forms as well, and specifically Cal grants. I'll be addressing those specifically in today's presentation as well as scams and frauds, things you guys want to watch out for, things that a lot of parents and students fall for year after year, that hopefully after today I can help you guys avoid, as well as student loans, kind of what's happening with that whole thing, the refinancing, as well as the student loan forbearance, and what the CARES Act did as far as putting all federal loans on hold, basically zero interest rates at this point in time until May 1st. As well as I'll be talking about other financial aid resources you guys have available to you to help utilize to help hopefully make the college payment process a little bit easier for you guys. Now, that being said, let's first talk about our organization actually started a memorial fund. It's called the James Russo Memorial Fund Scholarship. It's actually this year is the first year we're running it for the senior class of 21-22. So for your senior class watching today, this is for your scholarships for you guys. If you want to be eligible for the James Russo Scholarship, very simple. Right here, we have a YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and just type my name in, Ed Zamora, you actually see that our channel will pop up. And on our channel, basically what it has on there, as you can see in the left-hand corner, we actually have a screenshot of it, is the James Russo Memorial Scholarship video. If you just watch that, it's only about 8 minutes long, so 8 minutes and 6 seconds long. It explains to you guys how to apply for the scholarship. Now, the easiest way to help us and basically help our cause of giving out more scholarship money as much as we can is when you go to the YouTube channel, the more videos you guys watch, the more commercials basically throughout the videos you guys watch, the more those funds go directly into paying for the scholarship. So the more time you guys watch the videos, the more scholarship money we get, essentially the more money we give out to you guys. Our goal is this year to give away $15,000. We're going to be pretty close this year. We're a little bit short, but we're going to be pretty close. So the more people to jump on the channel, and just in most cases, to be honest with you, you just press the play all button. So if you go to the channel, like you see here is our channel, if you look in the left-hand corner, it says upload and play all. I have a lot of families who just click the play all button, and then the next morning tell me they watched 60 or 70 videos that night. I know you guys just went to sleep, you didn't watch a single video, which is perfectly fine for me. This doesn't bother me, because the more videos that run through, the more commercials, the more money we have for the scholarship fund. So if you want to help out, once again, 2 ways. You can watch the scholarship fund video for James Russo Memorial Scholarship and basically do the steps involved in the video to address or to get yourself eligible for the scholarship. And the second way is by just basically playing all the videos and letting them run to help us build a scholarship fund. And once again, all you need to do is go to YouTube, type my name in, as you see here at the top, Ed Zamora, and just let the videos run. And that's the easiest way to help our cause. That being said, let's jump right into some of the stuff happening right now, not just for juniors, but also for the senior class, even for the seniors right now that are still in the process of maybe applying to certain colleges or getting decisions back and wondering should we apply to more colleges. Now, right at the top, if your student didn't do well academically on the SAT or ACT, or you know your student as a junior or sophomore here on today's call, you know they don't do well academically on tests, standardized tests specifically. What I would be doing is I'd be going right here to this website right here. It's a great website, great resource. At the bottom of it is the actual link. It's called fairtest.org. It's an organization that puts together, basically compiles all the SAT, ACT colleges out there. Now, the benefit of this right here is if your student doesn't test well, or your students are looking for additional classes or additional schools right now to apply as a senior, very simple. On this website, they have a list of over 1,500 colleges and universities that are SAT, ACT optional, which means they don't care if you send the test scores in for admissions consideration. One thing I would be doing though, if you are looking to, as a senior, add more schools to your list that are SAT, ACT optional, or for junior or sophomores as you're building your list of SAT, ACT optional colleges, I would be asking any schools you find here, I would be first contacting their admissions office and asking them, if we do not send in SAT, ACT scores, will this be used against us for scholarship consideration? This is a very important question to ask. I'd say that more than likely, basically 7 or 8 out of 10 colleges do not care if you send the test scores in for scholarship consideration. But there are some, unfortunately, that will either reduce the scholarship amounts that you'll be eligible for if you don't send test scores in, or they will just eliminate your opportunity to get scholarships if you don't send test scores in. So it's definitely something you want to ask the admissions office. That being said, let's get right into the cost of college, because obviously colleges are not cheap anymore, unfortunately. Now, the average public university, basically across the United States, costs somewhere between $14,000 to $30,000. Now, when it comes to the private universities, it's a little bit more expensive, obviously, in the 35 to 50 range. And when you're talking about the elite colleges, the higher level private colleges, or some cases for you guys in California, if you're leaving California, going out of state for other schools that are public universities in their states, you're really looking at price tags of roughly around $55,000 to roughly around $85,000. So colleges have become very expensive, unfortunately. As you can see here, obviously it's not just a nationwide situation, also in California. We do have here in California a lot of schools that are in the 70+ thousand range. In fact, as you see here, the four schools here you're probably accustomed to hearing in California, or at least let's call it all 5, because these schools are very well known. All of them are now over the $80,000 threshold. The reality is most private universities are typically starting at $70,000. That's like the new normal. Unfortunately, the reality is for room, board, books, everything. I mean, the new reality as far as colleges costing $70,000, $80,000. And you're probably wondering, well, you know, if we wanted to look at a school and it's cost $80,000, $85,000, maybe we should take it off the list because we can't afford it. That's the number one made error across the board, by the way, when it comes to admissions that I've seen literally every year for over 24 years. The number one error on admissions is always the same. You guys look at the price tag as families, elect you can't afford it, and then decide basically since it's too expensive, you guys decide not to apply, which is the worst thing you can do. The reality is the schools you see here on the list, a majority of students, actually way more than 50%, in some cases way more than 60% of students attending these specific universities typically spend, i.e. pay the college, less than 50% of the actual starting price. So the reality is most of these schools are going to costing you less than it would if you guys be looking at public universities. So before you guys start eliminating colleges, let's start first talking about how you figure out if a college is generous or not, if it makes sense to you financially for your family. Now, right off the bat, the first thing that every family has to understand, and what many families do not understand, is how financial aid actually works. Financial aid is actually 4 pieces, okay? This is what most families don't realize. When I talk to families, either when I'm working at a college as a financial aid director or associate, wherever it may be, or if I'm talking to a family face-to-face, what most families think of when I say the words financial aid is grants and scholarships, which is true. Financial aid is grants and scholarships. But the term financial aid also means loans and work programs. So when you're talking to a financial aid officer, to make sure you guys are on the same level playing field as far as you guys are basically speaking the same language, you want to make sure that when you're talking about the financial aid component, you can say, I'm glad we're talking about financial aid, but I want to make sure we're only talking about the gift aid portion. You should write that down. It's a very important term. Gift aid actually means the financial aid component of free money. So if you're talking financial aid with anyone from the college, by the way, admissions, the director of financial aid, the associate director, the president of the university, and you start talking financial aid and you want to know how generous that college is or how helpful it could be to you financial aid wise, you always have to indicate, I'm glad we're talking about financial aid right now, but I want to make sure we're only talking about the gift aid portion. That will basically tell that person across the desk from you or across the Zoom meeting or however you're discussing it with that individual from the college, you don't want to talk about loans and you don't want to talk about work programs. Because if you only use the term financial aid, you are thinking as a family grants and scholarships. The college is thinking, once again, I've worked in colleges for decades, they're thinking guaranteed loans, guaranteed work programs, and maybe scholarships and maybe grants. As a family, I don't want maybe. I want to know we're talking specifically grants and scholarship, the free money you don't have to pay back, by the way. That being said, how do they even come up with or how do they even figure out what you're eligible for as far as financial consideration of any kind, to be honest with you? On the chart here on the screen, you see the actual way that every single university, from community colleges, the UCs, every school, by the way, across the country, every school from basically community college, Vo-Tech, all the way up to Harvard uses this equation to figure out how much, or if you have any financial assistance available to you. Now, right at the top, the first part of the equation is called cost of attendance. You should all write that term down. Cost of attendance is very important. I'll explain to you why it's so important in the next slide, by the way. Underneath that, what's subtracted from cost of attendance is what's called the expected family contribution. The expected family contribution is the number you will get by filling out the financial aid forms, either the FAFSA and the FAFSA and the CSS, or the FAFSA, the CSS, in some cases, institutional forms. If you have no idea what I'm talking about of any of these forms, don't worry, I'm going to go over all of them in a moment. But to obtain your expected family contribution, you must fill out those forms. Now, what happens is you take the total cost of attendance, which is the school cost all in for 1 year at that university, subtract out what's left, what they're looking at you paying, which is what's called the expected family contribution number. What's left after what the college costs from what you are expected to be able to pay is what's called financial need. Financial need is what the college should help you with in scholarships, grants, loans, and work programs. The reason I say the word should is because there's no guideline, there's no rule, there's no law indicating the college has to help you out at all with financial assistance. I'm going to, by the way, show you on today's presentation how to find out if your colleges are generous or not as you're going through this whole process. So right off the bat, let's talk about what is cost of attendance. Well, when it comes to cost of attendance is basically everything in the college. It's the tuition, the room and board, the books. It's basically every cost for one academic year to attend that university or college. Now, the cost of attendance, that number could be obtained by just Googling any school's name and the term cost of attendance. And when you get the cost of attendance, what you're going to see is there's going to be direct cost and indirect cost. Direct costs are what you're paying directly to the college. That's the tuition and the room and board cost. The indirect costs, which are not being paid directly to the college, but also make up the cost of attendance, are the books, basically traveling to the university, those kind of things. So both those indirect and direct costs, both of those together, make the cost of attendance, the total amount for that university for one academic year. Now, to get your expected family contribution number, what you guys need to do is fill out these forms here. There's two forms you guys have to fill out. All of you guys will fill out the form on the left. It's called the FAFSA form. No matter what your income level is, you guys all fill out the FAFSA form. On YouTube, I have about 90 videos in addition to the James Russo video about basically everything related to college. One of the videos that I made, because I get asked this question all the time, is I make X amount of dollars, should I fill out the FAFSA? Or I have this many rental properties, or I have this many assets, et cetera, et cetera. And the answer is all of you should fill out the FAFSA form. It's just basically standard practice to get any financial assistance. In some cases, in fact, some colleges are asking for the FAFSA form to be filled out, even if you're not applying for need-based aid, to be considered for scholarship consideration in some cases. So the FAFSA is always filled out. On the YouTube channel, I have the 7 reasons why you always fill out the FAFSA form, no matter what your situation is. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form, the form on the left, this form has been available for senior parents as of October 1st. Now, your goal is to get the FAFSA form in, if you haven't already done it as senior parents, by March 2nd at the latest, because March is basically the time frame where you start running on deadlines, the big deadline being the Cal Grant deadline, obviously. So when it comes to the FAFSA form, your goal is to fill it out, let's say in the next 2 weeks or so, if you haven't already filled it out already. Now, the FAFSA form on the left, I'm going to go in more detail, but that's been available for senior parents since October 1st. For junior parents and below, sophomores, etc., you guys aren't doing any forms this year. This is all informational right now. The form on the right, also available since October 1st, is required by additional colleges, mostly private colleges or essentially higher tier universities, like Stanford, Pepperdine, USC, these schools, Texas, University of Texas, all these schools require the FAFSA and the CSS profile for financial aid consideration at their institutes. Now, if you're not sure which forms are required by either college, very simple, just call their financial aid office, they'll let you know. But every school, from basically Vo-Tech county scenario all the way up into the high level Ivy League schools, all require the FAFSA. Some schools require it in addition to the FAFSA, the CSS profile, both available since October 1st, by the way. Let's go more in depth into FAFSA here, explain to you guys basically where to start it and what you need to do. When it comes to the FAFSA form, the starting point of any financial assistance, here is the website where you guys need to go, fafsa.ed.gov. Now, when it comes to fafsa.ed.gov, this website right here, this website is where you go to start the process of financial assistance. Now, what you're going to notice is there's two white boxes in the middle there. Either you can start as a new start FAFSA person, so start here, or you can use a returning user and log in. Now, the funny thing is both those white buttons take you to basically the same exact spot. So it doesn't matter which one you click on, you're going to be asked the next same question of either box, by the way. Now, both, when you first log on to the form, the website you see down below is where you guys need to go to start filling out the FAFSA form. Now, when you guys are filling out the FAFSA form, you guys are going to need two FSA IDs. You're going to need one ID for the student, one ID for the parent. Now, these two IDs are used to basically sign into the FAFSA as well as fill out the FAFSA form. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form itself, if you haven't already got your IDs as senior parents, down below, you see the link, fsa.ed.gov. That's where you go to create both the IDs. Now, we've actually created, as you can see here, creating the FSA ID login. If you go onto your YouTube channel, we actually have a step-by-step guide to get you guys to get both IDs. Now, you need the first ID to sign in. The first ID is the student's ID. The second ID is the parent's ID, and either parent can, by the way, can fill out the ID as far as get the ID for the parent. Now, when it comes to the first ID, when you first log into FAFSA, it's going to ask you for that student ID to start the form. Then, halfway through the FAFSA form, you're going to get to this page right here, the parent section. The second ID will be used here to upload your taxes directly from the IRS. So once you guys get halfway through the student's FAFSA, so when you're filling out all these financial aid forms, by the way, you're always doing the financial aid forms, no matter what form it is, as the student. The parent's information will be asked of you, but you're filling it out as a student. So you start the FAFSA as a student with their login. Halfway through you get here, you'll plug in your login as the parent. Once you guys plug in your login as the parent, what will happen next is it's going to ask you, do you want, as parents, to upload your taxes directly from the IRS? You will indicate yes, as you can see down there, the blue button, link to IRS. What this will do is we'll load up your 2020 taxes for senior parents this year, loads them right up for you into the FAFSA form, making your form in the world of financial aid 99% correct. So for senior parents, using 2020 taxes. For junior parents, when you guys start doing all these financial aid forms next academic year, 22-23 academic year, starting October 1st, you guys will be using your 2021 taxes. So everything is basically 2 years prior is the way it works here, okay? That being said, what goes on the FAFSA? What counts, what doesn't count? Well, right off the bat, your primary home where you guys live does not count. No matter how much equity you have in your home, it does not go on the FAFSA form. Second thing that does not go on the FAFSA, another unfortunate error financially that parents make and students as well, is your retirement accounts, your IRAs, your Roths, your 401ks, your 403bs. No retirement, your SEP, none of these things, no retirement assets get placed on the FAFSA form. There is one question on the FAFSA form, this is what kind of trips up parents a lot. It's asking you one question on here, what did your parents contribute, or essentially what did you guys contribute to your retirement account last year in 2020, well, 2 years ago, 2020. The reason it's asking you is to go on and see what you put into your retirement account. It does not want to know what you have in there. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a 401k. In the 401k, you have $100,000 401k. That's the value of it, $100,000. And last year, or 2 years ago in 2020, you guys put in $2,000 in your retirement account. What the form wants to know is the $2,000. That's what goes in the FAFSA form, not that you have $100,000, just your contribution, that's it. So then what does the FAFSA count? Well, very simple. It counts cash, savings, investments outside of retirement, college savings plans, the UTMAs, the UGMAs, which are the Uniform Trust, Uniform Gift. It also counts the 529 plans. All these plans, if it was set up by the parent, specifically the 529 plans, should go in the parent section of the financial aid forms. This FAFSA form, as well as the CSS or any forms you're filling out in addition to these. If the 529 college savings plan, etc., was set up by a grandparent or an uncle, and they're the principal and your student's the beneficiary, you do not put them on these forms because technically it does not belong to your student, even though they're beneficiary of these plans. It belongs to the principal, which do not go on these forms. It does not go on the FAFSA form anywhere if the asset, the college savings plan, is not in the parent or student's name as the principal. That's the way it works. Now, if you have second property, Those do count. So they want to know the equity in the second property on all these forms, by the way, okay? That being said, let's talk about how they calculate, how they figure out what your expected family contribution is, essentially what they think you can pay towards the cost of college. Now, right here, you see this is actually equation used. There's about 8 different versions of this, but this is a kind of a simplified version, which almost falls into every parent, or majority of families fall into this category of how they figure out what you guys can afford to pay for college or not. I'm gonna start from the bottom and work my way up. As students, you guys have what's known as an asset protection allowance. So a certain amount of money that doesn't count basically in the mix, or essentially as you guys are putting together your assets. Now the way it works is for students, they don't take the entire amount of the assets you have and say you can pay towards college. What they do is they take 20% of any money the student has and says that amount can be used towards a college expense. So let's say all the money a student has in the world is $1,000 in a checking account, which means 20% of that is $200. So that's part 1 of the 4-part equation. Part number 2, students' income. Students are allowed to, as of now, make $6,500 before $1 counts towards the cost of education. So if they did work in 2020 and they had taxes and they made, let's say, $5,000, you can upload their taxes the same way you would do your upload in the FAFSA form, only their tax would not count at all because they made less than $6,500. Now, starting next academic year, so 22-23 FAFSA, next October, they're raising the ceiling on this number from $6,500 to just around $10,000 your student can make before anything counts. So your student did work, or in 21, and they made $8,000, $9,000. Don't worry, it's still not going to count, because when they start using the 21 taxes, they have to make over $10,000 before it counts. Now, any money they make over these amounts, they want 50 cents on the dollar. So obviously your student working a lot could be a hindrance, because obviously anything they make over that threshold of $6,500 for this year's FAFSA or $10,000 for next year's FAFSA, they're automatically basically take half of that and count it towards college expense. Now, part number 3, parents' assets. As parents, you're giving what's known as an asset protection allowance, basically a certain amount right off the top that you guys have that's not in retirement, obviously, because retirement doesn't count, and it's not in the house, because remember, your primary home equity does not also count. Money basically in checking, savings, investments outside retirement, that does not count in the equation at all. This year's number is roughly around $10,000. So you want to write that down, just 10 grand is the amount that parents are not basically have to worry about if they have under $10,000 of assets, because it doesn't count at all. Even if you put 8,000 or 9,000 on the form, it still doesn't count the money. Until you get over that 10,000 threshold for the parent asset protection amount, that's when it starts counting. And they start counting the assets at 5.6%. So you start thinking the student's money counts at 20%, which is pretty high, considering the parent's asset money counts at 5.6%. It's pretty low, not that high to begin with. So to give you an example, if the student had $100,000 in their name, they would want you to pay 20 grand towards cost of college. If the parent had $100,000 in checking or savings in their name, you guys are looking at paying maybe somewhere around $4,400, $4,500 after you kind of take out the $10,000 asset protection. So it's pretty advantageous to not have any money in the student's name when you guys are filling out these forms for juniors and seniors and so on and so forth, as you guys are getting these forms done either this year or next year and so on and so forth. Now, part number 4, parents' income, the last part of the expected family contribution equation. Basically, they want to look at your income as parents, as well as looking at the students. But for parent income, you guys are starting to assess you guys at a rate of 22%, basically starting from 50 grand. Let me explain to you guys how it works. And by the way, for both student and parent, when they ask you for income, they're asking for adjusted gross income. That's the number they're looking for 2020. By the way, it's line 11, if you're wondering. So your adjusted gross income, if you guys are between 50,000 to 200,000, they're asking you guys to pay 22% of your income. If you're at $50,000 going down, they're gonna ask for a little bit more. If you make less than 30,000, by the way, they're not gonna ask you to pay anything. It's kind of the way it works. If you're making $200,000 and above, they stop asking you for 22% and start going up. That's why you see the equation says 22% to 47%. So kind of like a sweet spot to kind of figure out where you guys are. 50 grand adjusted gross, 200 grand, you're looking at 22, 23% of your income goes towards the cost of college. Making over 200, they're going to ask for more than 22, 23%. So going to start going up into that 30 range and higher. So of course, the more you make, the more they want you to pay towards the cost of college. Now, for those watching, if you want to figure out your number, very simple. I do this here to kind of explain to you how the numbers work, but I wouldn't write this all down. Also, I'm recording this so you guys can watch it later on when I send it to you guys if you've asked for it. When it comes to the equation, the easiest way of figuring out your expected family contribution is just going on College Board. On College Board, or you can just Google EFC calculator and it'll pop up any calculator. The easiest way to do this is just go online, do it. Most of the calculators take you 4 or 5 minutes to fill out. I just do this so you understand how they're coming up with the equation of what you should be paying towards the cost of college. That being said, let's talk about California grants. Now, at the end of the FAFSA form, or after you guys send in the FAFSA form, as well as once you guys basically submit your grades, because in California, you need to be sending your grades in, as well as you need to be sending in the FAFSA in. Those are the two requirements to see if you guys are eligible for Cal grants. Now, for those who are not aware of how Cal grants work, there's basically 3 different types of Cal grants, okay? You go from the top all the way down. So the 3 different levels of the Cal grants basically indicate if you're at the top level of Cal grants, you typically need a 3.0 GPA, a B average basically, a 3.0 GPA, and you typically need to have an income of under 100,000, depending on household size. Now, if you're somewhere around 90,000, that's kind of like the bottom end of Cal grants as far as the lower end of it. For Cal grants, if you're going to a 4-year institution in state, by the way, because to get Cal grants, you cannot leave the state of California. For Cal grants, for the first level of Cal grants, if you're making under 90,000 and your student is getting, has a 3.0 GPA once they submitted everything, your Cal grants, depending on the school your student's looking at, depending on the cost of your schools, obviously, because a public school is going to get less than a Cal grant and you're going to get from a private school. For Cal grants, you're looking at getting between $6,000 to roughly around just under $13,000 from Cal grants from level number 1. Level number 2 for Cal grants, typically used if you're going to a community college. For level number 2 of Cal grants, you're looking at essentially getting a little bit under $2,000. You're right around $1,650 so you're getting at the Cal grants for year number 1. Now, the second level of Cal grants, or Cal Grant B, basically, but the second level of Cal grants, your student has to have at least a 2.0 or higher. So for the first level Cal grants, you're getting the maximum amount for all 4 years. For the next level of Cal grants, the second level of Cal grants, I guess you call it the second tier, the B level, the student needs to have at least a B average, as well as an income contingency, like I just spoke about before. And for the second level of Cal grants, the first year, you're only going to be getting around $1,600. For years 2, 3, and 4 of the Cal grants, if your student had a 2.0, you guys will be getting somewhere between $6,000 to the same, just under $13,000 you'd be getting for level 1. Only difference is for level 1, you guys need at least a 3.0 or higher. You also have to be under the income threshold. Now, for both levels, for as far as income is concerned, if you're making under $90,000, you're going to be at the maximum level of a Cal grant, A or B. If you guys are making over 125,000, typically at that level, you guys have exceeded the ability for Cal grants to be given to you. So kind of like a weird little sweet spot is 90,000 to around 120. If you're in that level, you're very likely eligible for Cal grants as long as your students make the GPA requirement. If you're under 90,000, you're more than likely going to get the Cal grant as long as your student has a GPA. If you're over 125,000, you're unlikely to get any Cal grants, unfortunately. And then the third level of Cal grants, because there's 3 different levels, is typically for a vocational school or tech program, something that's anywhere between 4 months to 24 months in length and duration of the program. That the state of California will provide you assistance for the fees, for the books, and a few other things, depending on how long your program is, let's call it. Now, if you do have, as a student, a dependent, if you have a child, then for the third level, you are eligible for up to $6,000 in help in attending a vocational program of 4-month to 24-month program. So those are the 3 levels as far as Cal grants are concerned. Now, to be eligible for any California grant whatsoever, whether it's level 1, whether it's level 2, or whether it's level 3, you guys must fill out the FAFSA form, send in, obviously, grades, as well as be a U.S. citizen, and be making satisfactory academic progress. It basically means in the college to get the scholarship or the grant every year, you must maintain satisfactory academic progress. Basically means you must be passing your courses and going full time. Let's say you're not a U.S. citizen. Let's say you have no paperwork whatsoever, and you're wondering, can I apply for Cal grants? And the answer is yes. As you can see here at the top of the chart here, the top of the screenshot here, for the California system. And by the way, if you're looking for more information about Cal grants, at the bottom is the website for the CSAC information about explaining how the Cal Grants work and so on and so forth. 3 different levels I explained to you in more detail. Now, for those who don't have a Social Security number or who are not US citizens, what you guys can do is you can click at the top there for the DREAM Act application. Here on the DREAM Act application, what you guys are able to do is you are able to get financial aid in the form of Cal Grants if you're graduating from a high school in California. Now, for the Cal Grants, the way it works is you guys would not be filling out the FAFSA form because you do not have citizenship here or a permanent resident. Those are the 2 requirements to fill out the FAFSA form. So in lieu of the FAFSA form, so basically taking the FAFSA out of the mix for the Dreamers here, you guys would just be filling out the DREAM application, which is right here. And once again, at the bottom is the link for the Dreamers here who needs to fill out the application for the state of California to give you guys Cal Grants. Now, once again, you guys would not be filling out the FAFSA form if you guys do not have US citizenship here as far as a student, and if you guys don't have permanent resident. And when I say you guys, I mean the student. To give an example, no matter where you go in the United States, by the way, this works, whether it's California or Texas, New Jersey, New York. If the student is a resident, a permanent resident, or if the student has a citizenship here, they were born here, and neither of the parents have citizenship or permanent resident, doesn't matter. You can still fill out the FAFSA form. You guys are still eligible for financial assistance, both federal, state, and institutional financial aid, as long as the student is a US citizen or permanent resident. Those mean that you guys can fill out the FAFSA. The funny thing is your parents' legal status here doesn't matter whatsoever for that, okay? That being said, let's talk about the 3rd form you guys will be filling out, because we already talked about the FAFSA form as well as the California stuff. So let's talk about the 3rd form. Some of you will fill out, not all of you. It's called the CSS Profile form. Now, the CSS Profile form is vastly different than the FAFSA form. The CSS Profile form is filled out here on the College Board site. So you guys go to collegeboard.org is where you go to fill out the CSS Profile form. Now, when it comes to CSS Profile form, the form itself is also available since October 1st for senior parents. Now, you guys would be filling out or basically logging into the CSS Profile form using the student's College Board login. Very likely your student has a College Board login if they've done the PSATs, taken the SATs, or have done anything with AP courses, because all of those things have the same account here through the College Board site. And on the College Board site, through the student's login, because there's no parent login, by the way, you guys would fill out the CSS Profile form. Now, the CSS Profile form, if you log into the College Board, they actually have a list of every school that requires this form. So if you go in here and you try to fill this form out for UC Berkeley or Irvine or Santa Barbara or San Diego State or University, either one, they're going to stop you basically on page 2, because the CSS Profile is not required by any of these colleges. Now, if you're looking to do this for Stanford, or if you're looking to do this for Pepperdine or USC, they're not going to stop you because the schools do require the CSS Profile to be filled out, in addition to the FAFSA form. So one thing to know, though, the FAFSA form has about 100 questions, 100 standard questions called. The CSS Profile has over 400 starting questions, so a lot more in depth. By the way, these are the questions they're going to ask you. Okay, they're going to want to know everything that was on the FAFSA, as well as, do you own a home? If you do, when did you buy it? How much do you pay per month? How much do you own? How much do you think it's worth? It gets very in-depth. It'll ask you about retirement assets, 401k, 403bs, SEPs, IRAs, Roths. It asks you everything. What kind of car you drive? It gets very in-depth. If you get overwhelmed with either of the form, with any of the forms, to be honest with you, if you get overwhelmed with any of the financial aid forms, they all have save buttons. Hit the save button, take a break, come back a day or 2 later. You don't have to do this all in one shot, by the way. You can do this. I've had parents tell me they've done this over a 3 or 4 day process. Now, some of you might think, I don't want to do this over 3 or 4 days. Once you get through the first 100 questions of CSS, you're probably going to want to take a break, just being completely honest with you. I know a lot of accountants that don't even want to do this form because it's very in-depth and it's very tricky. It's made that way, unfortunately. The CSS Profile is created by the same people who create the SATs, by the way, just to give you an idea of how it works, okay? So take your time. There's no rush here, okay? That being said, what if we want to figure out as juniors or sophomores, maybe our student wants to do early decision 1 or early decision 2, or maybe a first choice, or maybe they want to do a restricted early action, okay? No, some of these, by the way, are binding, the things I'm saying to you guys if you don't understand how they work, where my student has to go for accepted. But we don't want to get locked in if we can't afford it. How do we find out if the school is generous or not towards our student, maybe even before you apply? Very simple. Here's what you need to do. They're called net price calculators. If you Google any school's name, by the way, if you Google University of South Carolina, or University of Vermont, or Oregon, and the term net price calculator, every school now has a net price calculator. So what is a net price calculator? Very simple. A net price calculator is just the way to think about it. When I told you guys, if you want to figure out your expected family contribution number, go on Google and you can figure out what your expected family contribution number is. That's a broad number of what every college thinks you can pay towards their educational cost. If you're looking at the net price calculator, that's a honed in number for that specific university. So if you do a school's net price calculator, it's basically telling you this is how much you're supposed to pay and this is how much money we're going to give you in grants and scholarships if you come here. So net price calculator is school specific. The expected family calculator is broadly speaking. So what I did was, by the way, the reason I have College Board on here is when you guys Google any school's name and the term net price calculator, you almost always get sent to College Board because most of the net price calculators are on College Board. So what I did was I Googled Harvard University net price calculator because everyone knows Harvard. Harvard came back and said, well, we cost around $76,000. Let's just call it $80,000 next year because they're going to raise their price again. So 80 grand. And what I did was I plugged into their net price calculator that we're a family of 4 and we make $100,000 a year and we have $50,000 in investments outside of retirement. And Harvard came back and said, you know what? If you get accepted, we're going to give you $64,841 of grant money. Now, I know it says scholarships, but there's no such thing as scholarship money at the Ivy League level. It's just a terminology difference, but it's free money at the end of the day, whether you use scholarships or grants. That being said, it's coming back saying that we can pay basically $11,950 if we attend Harvard University. I know you're all probably sitting there wondering, that's great, Ed, an $80,000 college that only costs $11,950, but how many of us are really going to get into Harvard? Now, the reason I use Harvard is because of the fact that everyone knows Harvard. That's the reality. So that's why I use Harvard's net price calculator. The reality is most colleges that are not Harvard are also extremely generous. Loyola Marymount, extremely generous. UCLA, extremely generous. USC, crazy generous. So what I'm trying to say is you don't have to go to the most difficult school in the world, or difficult schools in the world, like Stanford, let's call it, and get financial assistance. There's a lot of colleges where you guys are. Santa Barbara, crazy generous. Santa Clara, crazy generous. There's a lot of colleges where you guys are looking at, they're not insanely impossible to get into. And the way to find out if they're generous, if you're considering doing early decision 1 or 2 or restricted early action, or even looking at seniors now to maybe apply to more schools, very simple. Just Google the school's name and the term net price calculator, and it'll give you all the same information I just gave you here of figuring out if the colleges you're looking at are generous or not. And all that being said, let's talk about the financial aid forms. Let's talk about the parents' marital status. Now, when it comes to the parents' marital status, right at the bat, if you're filling out the FAFSA form, they're going to ask you about 5 different answers for marital status for parent. Answer number 1 is married or remarried. Answer number 2, divorced or separated. Answer number 3, widowed. Answer number 4, not married, so basically never married. Answer number 5, unable to provide parents' information. Now, if you indicate the parents are divorced or separated, as of this year, what will happen is another question will be popping up asking you, who does a student live with 51% of the time or more? Once you indicate the student is living with mom a majority of the time, all dad's questions for his income and assets are erased. They're not asked of you. Now, by the way, if the parent is divorced or separated, they have to be separated for 3 months or longer. So you guys are separated for 3 months or longer. Technically, in the world of financial aid, you guys are separated from each other financially. So they only count one parent's information. Starting next year, however, it's going to be who claims the student. This is a big change happening next year for junior parents that are watching the call today. For you guys, for 21 taxes, as you're filling them out, if you are divorced and you're wondering who should claim the student, you should think about it from the financial aid point of view as well. Because starting next year on the FAFSA form, they're going to ask not who they live with anymore. So before they didn't care who claimed the student, by the way. Starting next year, they do care. They're going to ask you who claimed the student starting on next year's FAFSA. So if you claim the student for 21, but you wanted to be on the other parent as far as they maybe made less money than you or had less assets than you to get more financial assistance, it's something you need to talk about because next year they're changing the way they do things. Now, if you're remarried, they will ask for the step parents' information, unfortunately. So stepmom, stepdads on the call, they don't care if you were married a week ago, if you did or did not adopt a student, not part of the process. If you are remarried, the step parents' finances do go on the financial aid forms, unfortunately. That's the FAFSA. On the CSS profile, it's school specific. Some schools will ask you if you guys are divorced or separated to fill out 2 CSSs, one for the custodial parent, one for the non-custodial parent, which means combined together, you guys are filling out a little bit over 800 questions. Once again, if you get overwhelmed, hit the save button. Do not rush through these forms. That being said, let's talk about what happens when we have multiple students in college. Well, what typically happens and still happening now, it's going to be a little bit of a change for this next year, but I'll discuss what's happening now for seniors. If you have multiple students going into school, it's actually in most cases very beneficial, because what happens is, you see here, student one goes off to college. Student one, the college, everything included, costs $35,000. So you fill out all the financial aid forms, and they said, you guys can pay $20,000 towards the cost of college. What happens is this student has $15,000 of financial aid space available for help from that college. Let's say next year, another student goes in. You fill out all the forms, and your income and assets basically stay in the same range, which basically is a 10% range, by the way, is what I'm talking about. And the college comes back and says, once again, you're looking at paying $20,000 for the students. Now, the way it works is this. Let's just say you have 2 students going off, and they each have colleges costing $35,000 a piece. Now, by the way, they don't need to go to the same college. One student go to community college, another student can go to Ivy League, one student can go to Ivy League, another one can go to public school, in-state, out-of-state, doesn't matter where they go. As long as you're going to accredited programs, it counts as multiple students in college. The reason I'm using $35,000 in cost for each student is to make the math easy. So we have $70,000 total cost. Last year we had $35,000. We fill the forms again, they say we can pay $20,000. The difference is now is you're not paying $20,000 a piece. You're paying $20,000 in total. You're not paying $10,000 for each student, which gives you the $20,000 in total, which means student one went from having $15,000 of financial aid space, now they have $25,000 of financial aid space. So the more students you have going off to college, the more financial aid space you have to help you guys get additional grants and scholarship money in place to help you pay for college. So students overlapping is actually very beneficial, especially at the higher price schools, because these schools give huge discounts. That being said, let's talk about frequently made errors on the FAFSA form. Right at the bat, first name, last name, social, and birthday. These are the 4 critical worst errors you do not want to make. These 4 errors will typically mess things up in the fact that you will probably lose financial assistance if you get the first name, last name, social, or birthday incorrect. So, no nicknames. If you're remarried, double check to see if you changed your legal last name to your spouse's last name on your social security card. If you did not, you must use your old last name because that's what's on your social security card, as well as social security numbers and birthdays. If you don't know your student's birthday, they don't know your birthday, just ask. The social security number is one of the worst you can make. If you make an error on the social on these forms, in some cases, it will make you do the form all over again. Even if you did the whole thing right, other than that one question, in some cases, you will be asked to do the form all over again. So those are the forms, those are the errors you don't want to make. The first name, the last name, the social, and birthday are critical. You cannot make those mistakes on the financial aid forms. And that being said, what happens after you send in the financial aid forms? Well, very simple. Financial aid forms go in, you guys get accepted. Within about 2 to 4 weeks after acceptance, you start getting these right here, the financial aid award letters. The financial aid award letters will show you the scholarships, the grants, the loans, and the work programs these schools are willing to offer your student to go off to that university. So obviously here, this is their starting point of them saying, if you come here, this is what we're going to give you guys. And then when it comes to these scholarships, these awards, and everything else, these can be negotiated, by the way. Now, the way you want to do negotiation, going back up, the way you want to do negotiation is very simple. When it comes to negotiation, there's 2 types of negotiating. Let me explain the 2 of them. You can either negotiate a scholarship, which you do with the admissions office, because the admissions office, by the way, handles all scholarship money. The second appeal, the second basically negotiation here, the second appeal can be done with the financial aid office, which is you guys appealing and asking for more grant money. Now, I suggest everyone appeal scholarship money. There's nothing that happens if you appeal a scholarship. Only 2 things happen. Either they say, yes, we're going to give you more, or they say, no, we're not going to give you any more. Those are the 2 things that happen when you appeal any scholarship. The second appeal has 3 outcomes. And if you have never done a financial aid appeal for grant money, I suggest on the YouTube channel, we do have a video on how to appeal properly. It's about 30 minutes long, and I'm explaining to you now why it's 30 minutes long. 3 things that happen if you appeal a grant from a scholarship from the financial aid office. 1, they gave you more money, you won. 2, they say we reviewed everything, You got what you got, we're done. You also won. Because number 3, they can take away all your grant money if you have no idea what you're doing. If you've never done an appeal before you do any appeal for grant money with the financial aid office, I suggest you watch the video we have on YouTube about how to appeal properly. It's basically a slideshow like this. It's not as high tech as the new videos we have now, but it basically explains how you can actually lose grant money if you do appeals. I've been doing this almost 25 years. I've seen families lose tens of thousands of dollars in grant money because they've been told by someone who more than likely has never done this before, you always appeal grants. You do not always appeal grants. It's the worst financial advice I've ever heard in 25 years of being a college advisor. And I've worked as a financial aid director at private colleges. So I know how this works. I'm not just talking about this from the parent side. I'm talking about this from the institutional side. They can take away your money if you make errors and you don't know what you're doing. That's why I made the video, not so much to teach you guys how to appeal, because it does teach you what the right ways to appeals are for more grant money, but also tells you what not to do that's going to lose your money, essentially. That being said, let's talk about loans. Now, when it comes to loans, your student, the moment you guys fill out the FAFSA form, will be given $5,500 of federal loans because you fill out the FAFSA form as a first-year freshman. The $5,500 are what's called federal direct loans. They will break into 2 categories for most of you. $3,500 of the $55,000 will be interest-free because it's subsidized loan. $2,000 will be unsubsidized, which means there is no one paying the interest for you. Basically, it's not interest-free for you guys. It will be growing on itself. Now, for the FAFSA form, once they give you that loan, you can elect whatever school you go to say yes to both the loans, the interest-free loan or the interest-bearing loan, yes to both. Or you can say, just give me the interest-free loan, or you can say, don't give me any loans. They have to offer you the loan, unfortunately, though, because of the fact that it's a federal entitlement. It must be offered to you. Now, the second place to look for loans are the private lenders, the Sallie Mae's, the Nelnets, the Laurel Ave, the College Ave, the Citizens Bank. I can go on for about 20 minutes because there's about 2 or 3 dozen of them now as far as providing federal private loans to you. Right at the top, the private lenders are, by the way, the #1 source right now because they have the lowest interest rates available across the market. The third place you guys can look to go for additional loan funding is the Parent Plus loan, which is probably the last place I'm looking at, because the Parent Plus loan not only does it have a high interest rate, next year's rate is going to be a little bit over 6%, which is very high for this environment, considering most private lenders start around 2 to 3%, as well as for the Plus loan, you're looking at an origination fee of 4.35%, which means for every, let's call it 10 grand you take out, you got to pay them essentially a kickback of $435. So if you're looking at a $50,000 loan, you're looking at paying fees somewhere around $2,400 and just in fees alone for this loan at over 6%, which is super high, even with interest rates going up now. So private lenders is probably the direction I'm looking to go in first. Then I'm looking to do the Parent Plus loan if I have to. Now, if you need more help or you're looking for more assistance, we do have a newsletter that goes out every month. Our newsletter, as you can see here, is basically detailing everything you need to do every single month for juniors and seniors. If you want the newsletter, if you haven't signed up already, very simple. Just shoot us an email. I'll give you my email in a second here on the chart here on the slide. Just send me an email saying, hey, Ed, we're from John F. Kennedy High School. I'm a junior or I'm a senior. I need to know what grade level your student is in specifically in the email, because every newsletter is grade specific, by the way. That being said, once again, if you could help us out, we are asking every presentation I do. And by the way, you guys are, I think, my 70th presentation this year. I usually do about 80 to 90 presentations a year. So every school I'm asking if you guys can just press that play all button, just let the videos run. The more you guys can do that, the more it helps out with the scholarship fund. And that being said, here are some useful websites we talked about here today. Obviously the FAFSA form, as well as the College Board site for the financial aid forms. For scholarship searches, you have FinAid and CapX. These are my #1 and 2 top scholarship searches I like out there as far as the websites go, private scholarships out there. Obviously, those have the most competition. So I would obviously be checking with the guidance office here locally, because they'll be able to provide you with the local scholarships which have the least competition, which is the best place to be looking right now. I actually have a video that just came out 2 weeks ago telling you guys that now is the time to be doing the local scholarships, by the way. And of course, we do have the YouTube channel, and also we do have a Facebook page as well. You can just look us up, Principia Prep, if you want to follow us there. We do post what additional high schools we'll be speaking at, as well as other information coming out. We also do post stuff on there about avoiding scams and other things that may be popping up to help parents out there. In addition to that, here is our contact information. Once again, I'm Ed Zamora. If you guys have questions or need help, that's my cell phone number. I literally get hundreds of text messages every day. Now, the easiest way to reach me is, number one, you can text me. I will answer text questions. Typically within 24 hours, I get texts out of the way quickly. That's why I like people texting me. Second way to reach me, that's our email at the organization. You can just email me, ask me any questions you like. That's the second way to reaching me. Usually I'm about 2 to 3 days late now in those text messages because I'm very inundated with CSS profiles, FAFSAs, and parents asking questions, and as well as me doing presentations for high schools. And the third way of reaching me is by calling me. I never answer the phone. It's almost impossible to get me on the phone. But if you text me, I answer questions all day long. And by the way, after answer your question, no matter what question you guys ask, I answer it. After I answer your questions, I typically just leave you guys the same comment. If you have any additional questions, please let me know. If you don't, if you wouldn't mind, please watching our videos here on our YouTube channel.